Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 116. In today's episode, I'm chatting with ChronicBabe herself, Coach Jenni Grover. Jenni is a wellness coach for makers, and today we are discussing how to help you do more crafting, making, and creating. We cover everything from practical tips and tool suggestions to make crafting easier, as well as the mindset shifts that can really make a difference. Jenni and I would love to hear and see what you get back to making as a result of this episode. And if you're not a crafter or a maker, please listen in anyway. The tips and suggestions and just conversation between Jenni and I can really apply to any project and even just general fibro life. Now, you may already know Jenni, but for those of you who don't, let me introduce you to today's guest. Jenni Grover is a wellness coach for makers. She is an author, quilter, and lover of rainbows. She cares deeply about the intersection of craft and health, coaching clients' physical, mental, social, creative, and spiritual concerns. A lifelong writer, Jenni has more than 34 years of experience in print, broadcast, and online media. She has been a professional speaker since 1996. In a past life, Jenni was a concrete expert whose work featured in the History Channel's award-winning Modern Marvels show. So, if you have cable TV and insomnia, chances are you've seen Jenni on TV. Jenni has lived with multiple chronic illnesses and chronic pain since 1997 and has devoted much of her life to advocating for those like her. Her book, ChronicBabe 101, How to Craft an Incredible Life Beyond Illness, has helped countless folks feel better. You'll also find Jenni in episode 31 of the Fibromyalgia Podcast, where Jenni and I talked about creative resilience. Jenni was one of the first people I followed when I was diagnosed back in 2007. As a young 30-something being diagnosed with fibromyalgia, I related to Jenni's work more than most of the other resources out there. So just on a personal level, I just want to thank Jenni for everything that she has done, because without her, I might not be here today. So thanks, Jenni. Now, I will have links in today's show notes for the other places where you can find Jenni for the other podcast episode, ways that you can connect with her, for Jenni's book. We also will have links for the other resources that Jenni mentions in my interview with her today. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to reach out, but you'll find those show notes at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/116. Here's my interview with Jenni. Hi, Jenni. Welcome. I'm so excited to have you back on the podcast.
Hey, Tami. Good to be back and be with your people. Hi, everybody.
As I just mentioned to you, it has been so interesting lately how much crafting and, making things has been coming up in coaching calls. I've got some students who are doing their practice coaching, and it's been coming up quite a lot. And I know that those aren't the only people in the world who are making things in a fibro body. And who better to talk about that with than you?
Yay, thank you.
So why don't we back up a little bit and kind of tell people just a tiny little bit of how you got here and what you're up to these days.
Oh, sure. Well, Tami, you and I have known each other for quite a while now. We go back a long way. I can't even remember exactly how we met, but I also have fibromyalgia. And we probably met through my ChronicBabe work.
You were one of the people I followed when I was first diagnosed.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool. Yeah. So I did that work from 2004 to 2019, I think is right. Or it might be 2005. I've kind of forgotten because it's been a long time, but for 16 years, I was a professional chronic illness patient advocate and chronic illness coach. And that really grew out of my experience of having a bunch of chronic illnesses, not just fibromyalgia, but also asthma, Raynaud's, IBS, anxiety, depression, PTSD. A bunch of stuff show up in my like early and mid 20s, right? And I've always been a very creative person. And I always am trying to cultivate resilience, a deeper resilience in myself. And so creating that ChronicBabe project was a way for me to pull my creative, crafty side and my advocate side together and make the very resource that I wished for. I made it like 8 years after I got diagnosed, because when I got diagnosed, I got a pamphlet. That's what I got. I got
Mm-hmm.
a trifold pamphlet, and they told me to take Advil. And I was like, well, that's certainly not enough. so, so in the early 2000s, I made this resource and I just kept it going, and I published a book and I did a lot of speaking gigs. So I've been really like obsessed with helping people feel better, despite chronic illness. And so I did that for a long time. And in 2019, I just burnt out,
Mm,
16
yeah.
years of being in a body with chronic illness, working on chronic illness stuff. A lot of my friends have chronic illness, as you might expect. And like at some point, some of us anyway, need a break. So I was looking for work that would still allow me to help people and to bring my creative side to the forefront. And so I went into training as first a creativity coach, and then my perspective broadened. And so I shifted to being a wellness coach, because creativity is part of wellness, but we also need to think about our physical and mental and social and spiritual wellness. So that's where I've landed for these past few years. Is I'm a wellness coach, mostly for creative people, for makers. A lot of my people have chronic pain and have chronic illness. And part of that's because of my background. And part of that is just because humans get hurt and they get sick. So I love helping people stay creative and vibrant no matter how they're feeling. And sometimes that creativity helps them feel better. So it's a pretty fun career shift for me.
Yeah, it totally makes sense to me because creating, crafting, making is a physical thing. Like, even
Mm.
if you're doing something like, beading or making earrings, like it still utilizes your hands
Oh,
and,
yeah.
sitting in one place potentially too long. Like, it just makes sense to me that there would be a connection between our physical health and our ability to make, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And our mental health too, because when we feel like we have an interest or a passion that we're not pursuing, then we feel crappy. That's just not, I'll put a fine point on it. We don't feel good. And so I love making sure that people get to keep being themselves, expressing themselves through their creativity, while also taking good care of their bodies. And, you know, I almost said luckily, unluckily, but I guess lucky for the people I work with, I have a lot of experience with that, so I can
Right.
draw on that.
Uh-huh. Exactly, exactly. And, just speaking as a coach, and I know you feel this way too, there is nothing better than helping people get back to doing the things they love, right?
It's my favorite thing. Like when I work with a client, okay, I have an example of a client. She came to me. She was heading into retirement. She felt isolated. She felt like her creativity was just sapped. And within a few sessions, she was booking travel, planning a vacation with a friend. She bought this beautiful flowy dress that was more her style, because she'd been wearing clothes that were quote unquote appropriate for her work, right? That didn't fit her style. And she was making more art again. And it just, to see that shift, I could see it in her face and the way she holds herself. It's so different. And so I want that for my people.
Yeah, definitely. And chronic illness can feel like a massive taking away,
Oh,
right? Like
yeah. Oh, yeah.
your body is no longer the body you remember. Sometimes we lose relationships, jobs, and to lose this other part of you, maybe your livelihood may just be a source of joy, but yet
Mhm.
another thing being taken away. And so doing what we can to get that added back in, it's what
Yeah.
makes life worth living, you know?
Oh, for sure. Well, in my own life, I've been a writer my whole life. I wrote my first novella when I was between the ages of 11 and 13. I started working as a professional journalist at the age of 16. Like, I've just always been obsessed with writing and telling people stories and through that helping people. And when I first got diagnosed with fibro, I mean, my hands were so bad. It was so limiting in terms of how much work I could do. And so for many years, it was almost like, what's that game where you're trying to hit? It's like a
Oh, the
whack-a-mole.
whack-a-mole. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So like we'd fix one thing and another thing would hurt and we'd fix them, and so it was like medications and hand braces and ergonomic office setups and timers that go off to help me remember to move and stand and creams and just like you name it, I did it. And I mean, I was willing to do all that work because writing is like so much a part of who I am. I was not willing to lose that. But over the years, I've learned all these tricks that allow me to still be a writer. I do it very differently than I did when I was younger. Like I used to pull all-nighters. I used to sit at the keyboard for 4 hours straight. Like
Right.
none of that. Now I have a timer that goes off every 20 minutes where I do 2 minutes of stretching. I'm currently standing in front of my sit stand desk, which will probably go up and down multiple times during this interview. Um, I schedule my day in like little chunks. So I wrote for an hour this morning. I ran an errand. I wrote for an hour. I took the dog on a walk. I wrote for an hour. I had lunch, like that kind of pacing. So I've learned so many strategies. And oh my gosh, voice to text, that technology has been incredible the last couple of years. Like it's changed the game for me, just being able to dictate so much
Mhm.
stuff. So, I've had to stay open to the tools that are available to me and also open to like pay attention to my own mindset challenges, the resistance I sometimes had to changing my way. So that's been a real learning process. So when I see a client or even a friend or a colleague and they talk to me about how they're missing doing something because their body isn't cooperating or their mental health isn't cooperating, I go into overdrive. I've got like 10 things they got to do, to kind of get it back. Cause I will
Yeah.
not accept that they're going to just let it go. Like, we're going to work on this.
Right, right. And what's also unacceptable is trying to keep doing the things the same way you used to and sacrificing
Yeah.
your physical health to do it. That is also not acceptable because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah. Right. Well, sometimes people, um, because of their ignorance, and I don't mean that in a negative, just straight up, they just don't know. They don't know what's possible. So
Mhm.
they may not know that a sit stand desk is available. Like they may not know I have this desk, I press a button, it goes up and down. They may not know that's the thing. Or they may know that's the thing, but it's too expensive and they may not realize they could use like an Amazon box to elevate their laptop and keyboard instead.
Yep.
There's always options that we can play with. And so much of it is about letting ourselves evolve to meet the current circumstances. That's about growth mindset. We can either have a fixed mindset where we stay where we are, we're pissed off because we can't do it the way we used to, we don't want to change. That's where we're comfortable. We dig in our heels. That's what we call a fixed mindset in coaching. I know you know that. You're nodding, but your
Yep.
listeners may not know. But then there's this growth mindset where we're open to possibilities and we're willing to try things and willing to try things and fail and be
Mhm.
okay with that because that's how we learn what's going to work or not work. And so we can be one or the other. I mean, we're all on a spectrum of it. It's not a black and white thing, but to lean into that growth mindset of being willing to try and willing to investigate and research and willing to maybe make mistakes or try things that don't work and set aside discouragement. And like that often means surrounding ourselves with people who believe in us and remind us that it's okay to try something and fail. They're going to help us find more solutions. So that's why I have a coach. I have a therapist. I have a whole pain team. So a PT and an OT and a pain doc, and I've got friends and colleagues and a mentor. And like, these are all people who help me remember when I forget that I can keep going. Cause even I, as a professional, I still sometimes want to give up because it can be a drag. It can be a real drag to have your body kind of defy your desires over and over again. So we all
Right.
need that.
We do. It's so true. And I have a coach too.
Hmm.
We just it's so hard. You talked about ignorance and it meaning just not knowing, right? Like not
Hmm.
knowing
Hmm.
about a sit-stand desk potentially. But also sometimes we're blind, right? Like it's really hard to see our own stuff
Oh, yeah.
because either, I mean, let's be real, brain fog, right? Like you cannot
For
think
real.
clearly.
For
So
real.
problem solving isn't always something that we're good at, especially if we're in the middle of the pain and the fatigue and, all flared up.
Yeah.
Your brain is
Yeah.
not going to be helping you come up with solutions in that moment.
Right.
So
Right.
we need to have, other people reflecting that back to us or asking the questions that help us find our own answers. I think
Hmm.
that's one of the biggest things that's helpful to me is people just asking good questions.
Oh, yeah. I love it when I'm working with a client and they say, well, that's a good question. And I'm like, they should all be good questions not should, but you know what I mean. I aim for them all to be thought provoking, challenging questions. But yeah, we want to stay open to that. And we need to call in, like you need Team Tami, I need Team Jenni. We need our people to help us figure that stuff out when we have those blind spots that you mentioned. It's really important.
Can you hear that?
Oh, I do hear that. Only just now did I. Are they
He is
being
outside my door just yelling.
I only just heard it like right when you asked me if I did. So,
Oh, we'll give him just a second. We'll
okay.
we'll, we'll edit this, but we'll
You
give
can
him a
leave it
second
in.
to
Leave it
to
in for the
realize I'm
behind the
not opening
scenes.
the door.
Yeah, that's if I left the door shut with her outside, she'd be like scratchy scratchy on the door
Mhm.
nonstop.
Yeah,
So,
and Finn is so young, he would be climbing over everything, and it'd be
mm.
once he's older,
Mhm.
I'll probably do the same because, it's easier just to let him come and go, but he would be all
Yeah.
over everything. Okay, let's just give it a pause and then I'll pick that back up. Let's see, we were talking about growth mindset and,
Mhm.
oh my God,
Oh,
man.
yeah, I heard that one. Oh, buddy.
Oh, too funny. Okay, let's see, where do we want to go from here? Okay, I know where I want to go. All right.
Mhm.
So thinking about some of these, mindset shifts and things we have to do differently, what are some, I don't know, little bits of advice that you might give somebody to kind of help them moving in the right direction if somebody is feeling
Mm.
just, really stuck, like they can't do the things that they want to do.
Yeah, yeah. So I think a really simple early step to do is to start searching online for whatever the topic is and making it accessible. So, accessible sewing, accessible quilting, accessible knitting, like those kinds of things. There are often people today who are writing about those topics, or they might be on Instagram making videos to show you tools you can use. Um, so that's always a good place to start. A friend of mine, her name is Rebecca Cartwright. She has an Instagram account called Creativity Over Productivity. I think that's right. I'm going to double check and just make sure. And Rebecca is a crafty person, and she has had all kinds of health challenges like you and I have gone through. And she is dedicating this Instagram account to advocating for and teaching people how to do more creative work and to focus on that creative energy rather than measuring their productivity against people who don't have health challenges. Yeah, so she's creativity over productivity. And that's a thing that I see a lot too that I always recommend people do is to try to get out of that comparisonitis trap, because, and that's comparing ourselves to ourselves when we were not sick,
Right.
you know?
Yes, that's a biggie.
Um, that's a real biggie. And then it's also comparing ourselves to friends who also don't have the same limitations, and then comparing ourselves to people online. And I mean, come on, because everybody knows Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff, like everything can be edited. I mean, I'm pretty straight up real on my Instagram. Like, I don't put on makeup to do stuff. I just like do my thing. But I still edit some of the videos, and I
Well,
move
and you're
piles of
also
crap out
not
of
doing
frame.
it on the day where you feel real crappy either. Right? Like,
Mostly
just
not. Yeah,
naturally, it's sort of the highlights of your life because
totally.
that's what you naturally want to share, right?
Yeah, because who wants to share? Oh, I felt terrible today, so I just lay on the couch watching The Walking Dead for 5 episodes and eating Cheez-Its. Like, that's not good social media content. I mean, it probably would be for 30 seconds, but
Right, right,
yeah,
right. Yeah.
that's not when we're going to be excited to like share our lives online. So if you're comparing yourself to people online, so I'm a quilter, so I'll use quilting as an example. There are people who crank out a quilt a month, and I'm lucky if I get 1 or 2 done a year. So if I'm comparing myself to someone else who doesn't have health issues and maybe has a lot of money or maybe is retired or whatever, I'm going to feel like crap about myself. So I like to challenge people to back away from the habit of comparing ourselves to other people and to our pre-illness selves, you know? So that's another trick. It's not really a trick. It's just a practice I like to teach people.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, thinking about pacing, I think, is really key. So hold on, clear my throat. Excuse me. Thinking about pacing is really essential, because when we weren't sick or we didn't have other physical limitations or disability, we may have been able to work at a faster pace. I mean, I know that when I was younger, I could work an 8-hour day at a job with an hour commute on each end, and then go home and write for 3 more hours, and then stay up late on the phone with a friend, you know what I mean?
Right,
And be
right.
fine the next day. That's not my life now. I'm in bed at 9 o'clock. Like, this is how, if I work 6 hours in a day working for myself, I feel like that's a pretty busy day. So we need to think about how we pace our day. And there's lots of ways we can pace ourselves. We can use apps or reminders on our phone or our laptops. We can even use a little like wind up reminder, like a timer I'm holding up for people who are just listening. And you could use these really simple tools to remind yourself to pause and take a break. Like for me, remind myself to stand up if I've been sitting for a long time, or to sit down if I've been standing for a long time, to rest my hands, to do some stretches, move my neck, move my body around, drink some water, maybe close my eyes if I've been staring at a computer screen. So we can use these tools to kind of incorporate little breaks throughout our day. And also, sometimes we need to take a day off. Like, it used to be that I would quilt every single day for a couple hours.
Yeah.
So last Sunday, I did a bunch of gardening, which uses my hands, and I was like bending over a lot. And then I came inside and my friend came over and I sat at a table and hand sewed for a couple hours. And then the next day, my right hand was just killing me. And I think it's partly because I didn't think about that pacing. I didn't think about how many hours in a day. And so instead of quilting every day this week, I'm taking the whole week off because I have to rest my hand. So that's the other thing to remember, is that when we learn pacing strategies that work for us, we have to continue to honor them, because if we blow them off, then we will be more limited for more days. And so I think I
Right.
was just out of my normal routine. So I forgot to do what I normally would do to pace myself. But that was a learning experience for me. And to circle back around to that growth mindset, there are some people, and I used to be this way, that would beat themselves up for doing that. Like, I used to beat myself up and be like, oh, now I'm paying for it. And it's like, no, you're not paying for it. It's just your body giving you some signals that might want to make a different choice next time. So that's that growth mindset, looking for the opportunity to learn from something that didn't go great and do it differently the next time. So yeah.
Exactly. And I think those, getting outside of your routine really is a biggie, right? Because
Oh, yeah.
probably both of those two things that you did would have been fine on their own.
Oh, for
In the
sure.
way that you did them and how much you did them, putting them together. Same thing happened to me just last week. We had company come visit. And so we did like a tour of the underground downtown Seattle, which is super fun.
Oh,
And
cool.
then we went and toured my husband's work. That was super fun. But, the next day it was like, oh yeah, make a note. Don't do 2 walking tours in one day. That's not the wisest choice.
Yeah, right, right. But it's like you're out of your routine, you're excited, you're distracted, and
Yeah.
so you may not be as mindful about your body because you have guests, you're entertaining, like those things, and that's okay. Like it's not like we have to get mad at ourselves for not getting it like perfect every time. Au contraire, we need to just practice being gentle with ourselves and saying, okay, well, I learned something valuable for next time. So
Right.
the
Right.
goal isn't to create so many habits and processes that everything feels regimented and there's no spontaneity or fun. Like that's not the goal. The goal is to keep practicing and learning things that work so we can have an adventurous life, so we can go out and be the bigger, wilder, braver version of ourselves and know that if we feel kind of crummy the next day, well, we've learned something. And, if we try to regiment everything and break it down into rules for everything, then life is just not fun. It's just boring and stuffy, and that's not,
Particularly for creatives, right? Because
oh
that's
man.
that's not the way creative brains work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you're a writer as well. You know this. We need inspiration. We need influence. We need to be around people or in nature or listen to good music or play with fun color or whatever. We need those moments of input, sensory input, intellectual input that keep us excited, you know?
Mhm.
So, and that's the other thing I would say for all my fibro babes out there. There are days when we're really low and tired and we're going to be on the couch. And there are days when we have a lot of fibro fog. And those are not necessarily days to say, well, I'm just not going to be creative today. I think those are days to say, how do I feed my creativity in a different way today? So, you know, I have a garden. I grow fresh herbs out there. If there's a real low day, even if I'm eating a frozen dinner, I might go out and clip a couple leaves of basil, fresh basil to throw on my plate. And that's an act of creativity. I'm like making that meal a little bit better, a little bit tastier. Or I might put on a playlist that really lifts my spirit. Or I might put on the cuter pajamas instead of like
Mhm.
the ratty old garbage pajamas. Like we got to
I
find
always think
ways.
that when I put on lip color, I'm like, well, you know what?
Yeah,
But I'm putting some color on my lips, you know?
that's right. That's right. We need to spice it up a little bit. And so even on big flare up days, we can find ways to do that, but we need to set that intention and we need to work on making it a routine so it becomes more habitual that we're just automatically doing that. Like I can easily put on earrings and I suddenly feel dressed up. I feel like a little more energized. Or we can put a slice of lemon in a glass of water and it feels a little more special than just plain old tap water. We need those little moments. So even on those big flare up days, you can still listen to music and sing along with it or doodle in your journal or whatever, even if you're still in your jammies and you're stuck on the couch. Like that doesn't have to stop you from being a creative person.
Definitely, definitely.
Hmm.
Now, there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I just kind of want to go back to. So you talked about setting a timer for work, breaks. That totally is how I wrote both of my books.
Oh,
I
cool.
am a huge, huge fan of timers because it's so easy to get sucked in, and like next thing you know, it's been 4 hours and you haven't moved, gone to the bathroom, had a drink of water.
Uh huh.
So I am a
Yeah.
huge, huge fan of that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention is with pacing is we need to look at the bigger picture. I think sometimes the focus gets a little too
Yeah.
narrow on pacing.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of like my whole week. So I might do
Mhm.
stuff that's physically demanding one day and mentally demanding the next day,
Oh,
or,
yeah.
or change the kinds of muscles that I'm using, kind of like what you would do if you were working out, right? Like day, arm
Yeah.
day.
Right, right. Brain day.
Yeah, yeah, and just this pattern of work and rest isn't just, right now today. It's balance over the
Oh, yeah.
bigger picture, right?
Yeah. Yeah, well, when we're not feeling well, there's a feeling of like urgency and immediacy that is hard to ignore. There's stuff in our body and in our brain that's kind of screaming at us. It's going, Tammy, I don't feel good. Tammy, I don't feel, Jenny, I don't feel good. And it creates a sense of urgency. And so then other things we're doing in our day can accidentally take on some of that feeling of urgency, and then we get that tunnel vision kind of that you're talking about where we're so focused on this little micro moment. But I really agree with you. If we back out and we say, but how about this week? Or how about this month? Like, how does this fit into that context? So, can I take a breath and slow down today and care for myself in a deeper way? Can I be patient with myself? Can I show myself some love and respect? Like, this body is trying really hard to do its thing and it's struggling. So instead of being like pissed off at it because I can't do everything like I want to, what if we treated it like a really good friend that was hurting? What would we say to our best friend? We wouldn't say, keep going, girl. Like, no, we would say, you know what? Let me sit on the couch. Let me make you a cup of tea. I'm going to give you a gentle hug. Here's my cat to pet. We would care for her so much. So it's really great when we can learn to do that for ourselves. But you're right, Tammy, the context thing is really big. Like in quilting, we look at like people will make tiny, I don't even want to call them mistakes, but let's just say, we have points that are supposed to match or a triangle that accidentally gets cut off. So the point isn't super sharp, and people will lean in and practically have their nose on the quilt to show you like the mistake they made. But if they back out 2 or 3 feet and you can't see it, who cares? Context. Like it's just one tiny, tiny moment that isn't quite right. No biggie.
Right, right. And life doesn't come in perfectly measured increments either, right? And
No.
neither do projects, right? There'll be times where, in life, like having company over or whatever, where maybe
Yeah.
you just do need to do more. And then how do you balance that
Yeah.
out on a different day,
Yeah.
right?
Right. I have a perfect example of this. So my beautiful niece, Reagan, graduated from high school in May. And at the beginning of the year, she didn't quite ask me. She asked her mom to ask me, which is very sweet, if I would make her a quilt, a graduation gift. And I was like, heck yeah, Reagan's rad. I want to make her the coolest quilt. And then I've been really busy because I've been working on my business and working on my own creative stuff. And so I made a couple of like user errors. I started her project a little bit late. I was kind of overambitious. I said yes to making a queen size quilt, which is giant. And then I ran out of time to send it to a long armor. That's a person who will do the actual quilting, like sew all the layers together. And so I needed to do it myself in order to give it to her at graduation, which I really wanted to do. I just wanted to like physically wrap her up in it and hug her. And so I quilted it myself on my home sewing machine, and it was a beast. And so I
I
had
mean,
to
I can't
really
even
pace
imagine
myself.
fitting a queen size
Yeah,
anything
it's
on your
so
home sewing machine.
I know. So my sewing machine has like a 10-inch throat space. So it is designed to be able to fit up to like a queen size quilt. But as you're quilting it and running it through the machine, you have to hold the entire quilt on your shoulder to like give it, because if it drags at all, you have tension and then the stitches aren't right and everything goes crazy. So I'm holding this giant quilt, supporting it on my shoulder. If you're not watching the video, I'm lifting up my shoulder, and I felt really quickly that that was not going to be cool if I did it for more than like an hour a day. So every day for like 10 days, I did an hour on that quilt. And then even during that hour, I took a break halfway through and I did stretches and motion exercises to make sure that I wasn't hurting myself. And I took Epsom salt baths every
Right.
day. And I did not do any other stuff with my hands. I didn't make meals. I didn't mow the lawn. I didn't, do any other crafting. I was like, I have to pace myself. So I'm setting all these limits, but I did get it done. But also I learned I can be a procrastinator. So knock that off and never quilt a queen size quilt again on my home machine. It's too difficult.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, those were all choices that you made,
Yeah.
some better choices than others, right? But
That's
like
very kind.
but like the choice to okay, I am choosing to do this thing, so that means I'm
Yeah.
choosing not to make meals, not to do,
Right.
like clearing the board so that
Yeah.
you could take on a bigger project like
For
that.
real. And yeah, and part of that is also like I have people in my life, including my husband, Joe, who I can say to him, listen, either you're cooking for the next 10 days for dinner or we're having frozen meals, but I can't cook. And he's like, great, I got you. We'll figure it out. So we need to enlist the help of our people to say, and I had my nephew come and mow the lawn so I didn't have to do it. Like we need to ask for help so that we can prioritize this stuff. And it's okay to prioritize this stuff. And frankly, even if I was making that quilt for myself instead of as a gift, it would still be okay to do that. It's a choice that I get to make, that all of y'all get to make, that you get to make, So but we need to be intentional about it so that we don't break ourselves when we're trying to be creators.
Yeah, and that it's equally okay to say, "You know what? I really wanted to give this to her at graduation,
Yeah,
but I'm choosing not to." Right? There's such an
totally.
empowering thing when you consciously make the choice versus letting something happen to you, right?
Oh, yeah, that's a great distinction to make, Tammy. Thank you. Yes, I could have chosen that. And there, at any point, I could have stopped and said that's what I wanted to do. But I kept checking in with myself and asking, do I still want to try to finish this? Is it realistic? How am I feeling? So, I mean, I was checking in with myself every day to make sure it was okay. Um, but yeah, you're right. Absolutely, it would have been okay. She wouldn't have been upset. She still would have loved the gift if I brought it to her 2 months later or whatever. It would have been fine. But you're right, empowering ourselves to make that choice so that we don't feel like it's happening to us. I'm really glad you made that distinction because that's a thing that I remember from those early years after my diagnosis of just feeling like my whole body just slumped as I remembered this, like feeling so put upon, like feeling like everything was just weighing down on me and everything was happening to me. And there's such a big distinction. I think I've been doing this for so long, I might have forgotten how big that was. So thanks for making that
Mhm.
distinction.
Yeah, yeah. It is, it might look exactly the same on the outside, right? Like the decisions might be exactly the same, that the
Yeah.
actions that you're taking, but just the empowering fact of having made that as a conscious choice, right?
Yeah. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And I'm also just for people who aren't watching the video, I just moved my desk down to take care of my body too. So now I'm sitting instead of standing. So, and I did that because I had a little timer set to remind me. So there's pacing in action.
Y'all just saw it right there.
Right? Yeah, people watching the video are like, "Wow, she got short or something. What happened?"
But that's just such a perfect example right there,
Yeah.
and being conscious, being aware, I think a real practical mindfulness, right? Of just being
Mhm.
mindful of what your body is telling you and how different things
Yeah.
affect you.
Yeah, we don't really live in a culture that promotes a lot of mindfulness. I mean, we live in a very like fast-paced, fast food, intense media barrage environment, culture in the West anyway, in America. And it would really do us all a lot of good, I think, if we paused more just to take a breath or two and just do like a 30-second body scan and say, like, how are my feet doing? How are my knees doing?
Mhm.
How my butt doing? I was like, just take a little inventory and ask yourself, what do I need right now? So that's a good question for people at any moment, to just pause and take a breath and just say, what do I need right now? And then listen to what the answer is and honor it. Like sometimes we say, oh, I need a break, but I'm going to keep going. No, 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 no. If you hear I need a break, you pause, you walk away, you take a break.
Right. Or we think, oh, that's silly. Right. Asking that question,
Oh,
what do I need right now?
yeah.
And I need a
Yeah.
snack. Right. Well, sometimes you really do.
Yeah, that thing of people thinking that's silly. I mean, I feel like easily half or more of the coaching sessions I have with people every week, someone says, "Oh, this is dumb, but," or "This is silly, but," and then they name a need. And it's like, it's not dumb or silly. That's just a need. And you may think it's dumb or silly because you've heard someone else say that, or you've heard someone else discount their own needs, or someone's criticized you for having needs or desires. And so I think anytime we pause and listen to what do we need, and I guess I should say that second part is, what do I want right now?
Yes.
Sometimes what do I need and what do I want are in conflict, right? So we got to try to pick the healthier choice. But yeah, what do I want right now? That was a great question to think about. Reagan's quilt. What do I want right now? Do I want to keep working on this? Or do I want to pause? Those are good questions to ask ourselves. And then we really need to listen to the answer and honor it and not blow it off, because no one knows better than us what we need or what we want. And no one can really tell us what's okay to need or want. That's our choice, you know?
That's
That's
right.
our life.
And that's another place where we got to watch out for that comparison thing,
Oof,
right?
yeah.
Because maybe this person over here can do, a quilt a month and not
Mhm.
need all of these things, but
Mhm.
maybe you do, like it's don't compare your needs either.
Yeah, I think that's right. That's so right. It's funny. I mentioned my friend was over on Sunday sewing, my best friend. I adore her so much. And she is a single mom of two and she works full time. And so I do not have kids. I work for myself. I have no commute. I have like lots more free time and disposable income. And so sometimes she would like to be quilting more. She would be like to be doing more stuff like that. And she sometimes sees me being creative and making things. And so she sometimes has said to me, like, man, I sometimes feel kind of envious. I'd love to be in that position. So she was over on Sunday and I said to her, I've been so busy working and getting my business more strong this past year. This is only the second quilt that I'm working on this whole year. And sometimes I look at friends and I'm envious because I want to be making more stuff. And she said, let me hold on. I want to pause. I'm digesting that. You just said something that I've said a bunch of times, and it's actually quite helpful for me to hear that that's the thing you struggle with too.
Mhm.
So maybe we can both cut ourselves some slack on getting done what we are able to do with what we have. And I'm like, yeah, what a great, she's also a coach. So it's not surprising that she was like, hold on, let's pause and think this through. And, she thought about it and digested it for a
Mhm.
learning moment. But yeah, there's so many ways we can compare ourselves to other people. And for the most part, it does not help us.
Yep. Yep. And that could be anything from like using more accessible tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
To, I need somebody else to make dinner.
Right.
Like that trade-off, or in order for me to do these things that I want to do, I need somebody else to clean my house,
Yeah, right.
or whatever, like those, I don't know, the ways that we need to adapt our lives and not
Yeah.
feeling bad because we can't do everything.
Yeah, that you mentioned house cleaning, and that's a real big one for me because we have a house cleaner and I have had one for many years. And I have had friends say to me, "Oh man, with all that money you spend on a house cleaner, I mean, you could buy so much fabric. You could do so many things, or you whatever,
Right,
you know?" And
right.
I'm like, "Yeah, cool, but if I don't have her clean the house, then if I clean the house, then I have multiple flare-up days a month, and I can't do anything on those days besides like the bare minimum." So I would rather that's me throwing money at a problem, and I'm really privileged to be able to do that. I couldn't always do that. And but even when I was like very struggling, newly divorced, in the Great Recession, all my clients weren't paying my invoices. I still I ate rice and beans and ramen, and I still had the house cleaner
Yeah,
because I
yeah,
had to prioritize to take care of my health, and that was a way that I did it. And so we make choices, you know, and I still, even then, I recognize that was still an enormous amount of privilege because I have friends who can't even do that. And but we make choices, and it's okay. And so even though a friend might say to me, "Oh, I wouldn't spend my money that way." Well, fine. Don't spend your money however you want. I don't care. Like I'm gonna, I'm gonna spend my money the way I want.
exactly right. And our time and our energy, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and my social currency and, like, you name it. I'm gonna make those choices for me, and anybody who doesn't like it can just keep it to themselves. It's the nicest way of saying
That's
it.
right. That's right. So let's talk about some just like, I don't know, real practical things that people
Sure.
could do or do differently that might
Mhm.
help them get back to making things again.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we talked about pacing. So I'll tell you a couple of, like, specific things that I like. I like the break time app on the computer. It's a great way to set a recurring timer on your computer to remind you to take breaks. I like this little time. It's called the time timer. It's it's a silly name, but it's called the time timer. It's a visual timer. And so if you go to Amazon and look that up, it's very pretty and really inexpensive. And it's a great like desktop timer. So those are two pacing tools that I like a lot. I think that for practicality, for people who are crafty and doing hand crafts, I think it's really good to think about researching more ergonomic tools. So, for example, all my quilting tools are ergonomic tools. All my gardening tools are specially designed to not put strain on the wrist, for
Mhm.
example. And so,
Like the scissors
whatever,
that open themselves back up and at the right
yeah.
angle and
Mhm.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Mhm. And I have on my quilting ruler, I have this thing. It looks like a giant telephone. I'm going to show you, Tammy. Hold on. For the folks on video. So it has the worst name. Okay, it's called the Gypsy Gripper. I hate the name. Love the product. So it
Oh my
looks
gosh,
like
it does look like a giant phone.
yeah, it looks like a
If you
giant
guys
old
are
fashioned
listening to this,
handset.
you should watch the video just so you can see this thing.
Hi. So it looks like a giant. It looks like an old fashioned, like that we've still used in the 90s and 2000s, but it looks like a phone handset, but it's got a suction cup on each end, and you put it on your quilting ruler and it suctions it. And so when you're putting pressure on the quilting ruler, you're putting pressure on the grip, and you're not putting your hand flat and putting pressure. So it takes the pressure off your wrist. So I mentioned that as one example of many different ergonomic tools that I've discovered. So I think a very practical thing that everybody can do if they're a crafter is to look for those tools that make their craft more accessible, reduce pain, reduce strain and fatigue. So that's a really practical thing to do. And also find people like my friend Rebecca, who's doing accessible crafting, stuff online and teaching methods. And also, I think joining some kind of club. or a guild, like I belong to a quilt guild, is a very practical way for people to meet folks who do the same craft and then get a lot of ideas for tools like that. Like I've learned about almost every tool, ergonomic tool that I use because of friends I made through that like quilting club. Um, Plus you get to make friends. And then
Right. Right. Exactly.
and sometimes they help you with things which we all need help with. So that's another thing we all need to be doing.
I love that. I love that. And you and I talked too a little bit before we started recording is that, people like occupational therapists can be
Oh
a
yeah.
great resource for helping to figure out the ergonomics, the tools, different ways
Mhm.
of doing the task. Everything from, picking up your groceries to knitting or crocheting, right?
Yeah, for sure. I have brought nail polish to sit with my OT. I gave her a manicure one day so she could teach me all about posture and how to hold things. And she also showed me a few tools. Like I have this cool tool that sits on my hand that the nail polish bottle rests in. So I don't have to hold it and pinch the bottle with my hand, but it sits in this little holder that's on top
Okay,
of my
you're gonna
hand.
have to send me like the link
I
to
gotta
that.
I gotta send you the link to that.
'Cause
Okay, I'm
that's the
making
thing that
myself a
always gets me
note.
when I'm doing my nails too. I'm like,
Yeah,
"Where do I put this dang bottle?"
I got your tool. So it's being open to working with people like that.
Yeah.
I'll send you that link and maybe you can put it in the show notes if
Oh,
people want
absolutely.
it. Um,
Yes, yes.
so going to OT, going to PT, asking for help. And like, I mean, yeah, I've given manicures to my OT. I've done embroidery and hand quilting at occupational therapy. I once had a session where she just showed me how to put on and take off sports bras.
Oh my gosh, that's no
Because
joke right there.
it is no joke for a big booby girl like me. It is serious business. So, it was I needed it because like exercise is a big hobby of mine too. And because I do so much exercise, I'm able to be more creative. So they're really tied together. So
Mhm.
I needed her to help me figure out how to get the sports bra on and off without like ripping my shoulders to shreds. So, we need those people, Tammy. You're right. We need those guest experts. Um, and we might feel resistance. We might feel like it's a drag to go to PT or OT and like we don't want one more appointment in the week. But sometimes the skills they have, the things they can teach us are what make our craft and other hobbies accessible to us, you know?
Mhm.
And also, I think organizing your space so you can do your creative work more efficiently is really important. So I'm a real tidy person. I confessed to Tammy before we started recording that there are a couple piles of things off camera that you can't see. Actually, I'll just be real with you. There's some piles. There you go. I just turned the camera around. So, you know, but mostly my space is tidy and organized so that I can find what I need because I have limited time and energy and I don't want to waste that hunting for a special tool that I need or and I don't have unlimited money and I spend a lot of money on healthcare. So I don't want to lose an expensive tool that I need for crafting and have to buy it and replace it, for example. So I think that craft room organization or creative work or organization is really important so that we aren't wasting time or resources as we try to pursue this craft.
And I
So
think
that's
some of
another
that
thing.
too can even be like reaching for things, having the things that you use
Yes.
most close by. I'm thinking
Yeah.
about, in the kitchen, like cooking or something, or even just putting
Hmm.
away dishes. How we organize the space can mean more or less effort,
Oh,
right?
for real. Like in the kitchen, you want that triangle between the sink and the stove and the fridge. Like there's a workflow that can happen when they're all within a certain proximity of each other. The same thing happens in here. So for folks watching the video, you can see it, but I'll try to describe it. So I'm sitting at my desk right now where I work and write and do my coaching work on Zoom with clients. I can easily slide over here just a couple of feet and I'm at my sewing machine. And then I can turn around a couple of feet and be at my cutting table where I'm measuring and cutting things. Now, some people that I know in quilting, they would put their ironing board on their other side. So they're basically also kind of in a triangle.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to get up and move because it's not good for me to sit still. And so I actually have my iron about 7 feet over. So I need to get up and iron, and that helps my body so much. So friends come over and they look at my studio and they say, I don't understand why your studio is all set up like I would have it, except your iron is many feet away. And I'm like, that's because it's better to move our bodies. So I
Right.
don't want to sit nonstop all day. If I'm going to be in here sewing for a few hours, I need to remember that I need to get up and move. So it to your point, we're thinking about how we reach for things and move toward things, not just so that everything is in one place so we don't ever get up, but also thinking about how do I challenge myself to get up and move, because that also helps me. And then I have tricks like when I'm using the standing desk, or if I'm standing at my cutting table or my ironing board for a long time, I have an anti-fatigue mat that I stand on, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Yeah.
I have a special iron that has little feet in it that can come out. So I don't have to tilt my iron up and set it on its back on the ironing board. When I set it on the ironing board, these little feet pop out. And so it pops out so it's not burning a hole through the ironing board, but it's
Right.
always in that horizontal position. So I'm not tilting my wrist up and down hundreds of times a day during sewing sessions, So some of it is throwing money at the problem.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with that.
I mean, sometimes that's what we got to do. You can
Yeah.
also, the iron I have right now, a friend gave me because she didn't want it anymore. So that was free. So it's like, that's where it comes back to community and being with other people and connecting, because then they help us too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I'm trying to look around my studio and think of, the other thing I want to talk about is lighting.
Oh
So,
gosh, yes.
when we are already tired and already sore, we don't need to add eye strain onto everything else. So,
And some super bright lights can cause,
yes.
headaches and flare-ups. So sometimes it's tricky to find that sweet spot.
Yeah. Yeah. So my sweet spot is that I have a sewing machine that has a really nice built-in LED light. And I have overhead lights, but I also have task lighting. So I can turn off my overhead light and turn on task lighting at my table. There's task lighting by my sewing machine. And then I have a task light here on my desk. So I can turn overhead lights off and have like real nice mood lighting if I want to. So
But
yeah,
still
so
be
it's
able to see.
but still be able to see. Oh, and then one last tool I want to mention. So I'm 50, and I really, out of pure vanity, I am a little embarrassed to admit it, but I will admit it. I avoided getting progressive lenses in my glasses because I thought that was old people stuff.
Yep,
And
I did that too.
oh, why? Why do we do that to ourselves, Tammy?
I don't know. As soon as I had my first pair, I'm like, oh my gosh, I should have gotten these so many years ago.
Yeah. And it was like I I don't know why I resisted. So it was pure vanity. And now that I have them, I'm like, this is one of the best creative tools I've ever had, because I can see really clearly up close, and I can see really clearly mid length, and I can see really clearly far, which means I can do all the things with one pair of glasses. So I'm saving money and my eyes are happier and I'm able to do more stuff. So, like, don't let vanity get in the way. Who cares? Use the tools at your disposal. But the biggest tool, and I'm pointing at myself, I'm the biggest tool in this conversation. That's what I'm
It's
saying.
true. I love it.
But yeah, this brain that I'm pointing at is the biggest tool. So we got to also fuel this brain. And that means staying hydrated, taking our meds on the schedule that we're supposed to. And that also means setting timers. And that means eating as healthy as we can whenever we can, and getting good rest, and really like remembering that our brain, even though it annoys us sometimes because it doesn't work quite how we want it to, it's our most important tool. And so we need to do those practical health things to take care of it. And we also need to keep it soothed. And so learning how to take care of our central nervous system, which I'm sure you coach people on. Tammy is nodding vigorously.
Yes.
Yes. So like,
Yes, it's such a big thing, particularly for fibromyalgia because of, so
yeah,
quickly getting stuck in fight or flight. We've got to make
man.
sure that we calm that down. Yeah.
Yeah. We want to soothe, we want to bathe that nervous system in those like soothing natural chemicals. So we want to, and taking a nice deep breath, we want to pay attention to our breathing. We want to pay attention to our posture, how we're sitting, how we're moving through the day, how we're scheduling our day. How are we giving ourselves breaks to just sit with our body and breathe? Are we giving ourselves what we need to soothe our surroundings? So that mood lighting, that nice calming mood lighting, or listening to soothing music, or turning off the notifications on our phone or whatever it is, so that we're taking care of that tool, because we need our mind and our nervous system to support us in this work, called
Mm-hmm.
life. So,
Mm-hmm. You would keep your scissors sharp, right?
oh, yes, I do. I have a standing date for scissor sharpening every year. So, of
Sharpen your
course,
brains.
sharpen our brains. So, I mean, listen, I'm not opposed to the occasional cookie or donut, but I also eat a lot of salad. I try to, I don't want to demonize any food, but I do try to eat a pretty low inflammation diet. And um, everybody's got different dietary needs and desires, but we want to take the best care. We want to fuel ourselves,
Right.
as much as we
Right.
can.
Right. And more of the things that help you feel good and less of the things that make you feel bad.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
that's the goal.
Yeah.
And your
And
body
it's
will tell you.
oh, it will. And it's never all or nothing. Like we're always on the spectrum of like, if I eat mostly healthy all day and then I have a donut, it's cool. Like it's not gonna end the world because I had a donut, right? But we want to think back to what we are talking about perspective, like zooming out and looking at the big picture. We want to look at the big picture. Are we like, I have clients and they'll set a list of goals for themselves and they'll say, I have 15 things I want to do this week. And I say, cool, which 10 of them will you do? Like, it's not because we don't want to overwhelm ourselves and feel like we have to be perfect at checking off every single thing. We want to say, I've got all these options for taking care of myself. How many are accessible and possible for me today or this week,
Right. And sometimes self-care is not doing the things. I've had several
Oh,
students lately that realized that, part of their self-care was to actually loosen up on their dietary
oh,
restrictions.
yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you said that. I had a similar experience the last few weeks because um, I took up running, which is wild to me because I was a runner in my like high school and early 20s, and then fibro showed up and I didn't run. And then recently I've been feeling so good the last couple of years that I decided to try it again. So I got pretty good, was able to run almost a 5K distance, and then I had an overuse injury in my hamstrings, so I had to take time off for physical therapy for months. And then I started to get better and I started to run again. And then I started having some pelvic floor challenges and I had to go for pelvic floor physical therapy. And so then I did that for a while and then that got better. And then I started to have problems with my calves. And like my physical therapist said, okay, let's get working on this. And I said, no, I'm going to stop. I'm just going to take a break. I need a break for a few weeks. Like I've been working since November. We're talking right now, it's August. That's almost a year of like being in some kind of physical therapy. I need a break. I need a rest. So
Mhm.
I'm pausing running. I'm pausing physical therapy. I'm still exercising, but I just needed a break. And that's okay. Like we don't have to be self-improvement robots that just do it every day till the end of time.
Oh gosh, even just thinking that makes me exhausted.
Right? Ah, gosh. Yeah. No, sometimes we got to take a break. So I'm dog sitting for my friends for, 10 days or ish. And I have this dog. So my workouts this week have mostly been like I'm walking the dog 2 or 3 times a day. And that's perfectly enough for me. She's a brisk walker. So that's great. it's actually, it's a beautiful way to take a break from this other self-improvement work I've been doing. She's
Mm.
way cuter than my physical therapist too. Not to, harsh on my PT. She's cool, but
Pretty
this
much
dog
any
is way
dog
cuter.
would be, right?
Right? I mean, yeah, heck yeah.
I love it. I love it. So as we wrap up, I would love for you to just like any other thoughts that you have, anything you want to share to the people who are listening who are like, okay, maybe I can try this again. Oh, she's so sweet.
Yeah, I just tilted my camera down because I think she knew we were talking about her. She came over to say hi. Hi. Yeah. So any last tips, huh? Any
Yeah.
last things that, yeah. Well, to come back to something we talked about for a little bit, I think, again, thinking about the big picture of, we're here in this life. We have so many choices and so many options, and we're so very lucky to live in the culture in which we live and have all these beautiful opportunities at our disposal and resources to care for ourselves. And so trying to think big picture and think about the overall arc of our wellness. And when I say wellness, I mean physical, mental, creative, social, spiritual. Let's look at the big picture and let's be kind to ourselves. If not everything is perfect, well, that's okay. Like if it's pretty good in the balance of things, awesome. So as much as we can to kind of back out a little bit, zoom out and get that big picture view and make sure that we're not too hyper focused on a couple of specific small things. That's one. And the second is, I think, just don't be afraid to ask for help, to get guidance from experts, from people like me and Tami, or from people like your occupational therapist or a nutritionist or whoever, folks who are trained and certified and know their stuff. They're there for you. They're resources for you to take care of yourself, because it's impossible for us, even though we are the experts on ourselves, we can't know every single thing. So don't be afraid to ask for help. And then the third thing I really want to remind people is just to try to pause and see beauty everywhere around them. Like, it's as this beautiful dog is like nuzzling up against me and will not go away from me and wants to be petted constantly. And she's so beautiful. And like the texture of her hair and the little gray hairs that are starting to come in and the waves of that is so beautiful. Like, we can see beauty everywhere around us. And so just trying to remember to look for beauty everywhere, because also for us creative folks, that's where we draw inspiration. Like this dog, her collar is so pretty. I'm going to make a quilt based on her collar because it's got this real cute quilty design. So, and she's looking at me like, what are you talking about?
I love that though, because it's like we have to it's like you have a creative stomach as well as a food stomach and you need to feed it, right?
Yeah, that's so right. We do. We are constantly in need of creative sustenance. That's right. We need music and flowers and, you know, beautiful scented candles and colorful, funky people around us. And we need textures. Like, I love to just, in quilting, we talk about petting our fabric. Like, I'll just go over and kind of run my hand down the fabric on the design wall and stuff. And we need to feed ourselves. It's a great metaphor, actually. We need that creative sustenance. That's right. And it's there for us if we open our eyes, if we stay open to its existence in everything.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So real quick then, before we end, last thing, for people who are thinking about, getting some help, what does working with
Oh,
you look like?
oh, thanks for asking. Um, yeah, so I generally work with people on Zoom. I'm so thankful for that technology because it means I can have coaching clients everywhere.
Yep.
We meet generally once a week for about 50 minutes, and we have deep conversations in which I'm really partnering with my clients to help them learn to discover what it is they need in order to thrive. And so we have sometimes pretty serious soul searching conversations, and sometimes really wackadoodle, goofy, silly, ridiculous conversations, and everything in between. And we're getting real with each other. I'm a coach, but my clients are the experts on their lives. So we are peers. So we are on a level, and I just happen to be trained to help them do more investigation. And so my clients generally work with me for 12 weeks or more to really investigate and set goals. And I help guide them in meeting those goals and offer gentle accountability. And, you know, for the most part, people have fun with the process. It can be challenging, it can be emotional, but it can be so fulfilling. And I work with a lot of people with chronic health stuff because I just know so many people with health stuff and they know my background.
Well,
Um,
you are
and
ChronicBabe, so.
I am ChronicBabe. That's right. So people know that they can come to me because I understand that part of it. Like some wellness coaches, because I am a wellness coach, some wellness coaches are like, eat this and do this stretch and do this exercise. And that's not me. I'm not prescriptive in that way. I work
Mhm.
with each client has their own custom tailored experience with me to try to figure out what's going to help them feel the best in mind and body and creatively.
And your focus is on people who are makers, crafters,
Yeah, right. I'm a wellness
quilters.
coach for makers. So yeah, quilters, knitters, painters, writers, singers, you name it. If you're a creative person, or even if you're an aspiring creative, or if you
Right,
feel like you're
right.
not creative, but you want to be, oh, I love to work with those people because I love it when people says to me, I'm not creative. And I'm like, give me an hour. We're gonna gonna help you
Yes,
see that you are creative, so I love working with those kinds of people.
that's awesome.
Yeah,
Well, thank
thanks,
you so
Tammy.
much for being here, Jenny, and for sharing all of that. I know this is going to be helpful for so many people and get people back to doing the things they love to do.
Oh, I love it. Thank you, Tammy. It's always a great experience to be on your show and to talk with your people who are really my people too, my fibro people, my chronic babes. So it's always a pleasure. And just look forward to hearing from folks if you have questions or want resources. If you want to know what that nail polish holder thing is, send me a message. I'll tell you. I'll send it to you, Tammy, after we're done.
Yes, we will definitely put that in today's show notes. So for you listening, it's going to be fibromyalgiapodcast.com/116. We'll have that. We will definitely have that nail polish holder, but we'll also have how you can get in touch with Jenny and some of the other resources that we've talked about too. But Jenny, why don't you go ahead and just tell people how they can find you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I'm Coach Jenni Grover, like everywhere. So the website, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, you name it. Coach Jenni, and that's Jenni, Jenni, Grover, like Sesame Street, Grover. So Coach Jenni Grover, everywhere you go, that's where you'll find me. And if you're looking for my book on thriving with chronic illness, that's also under Jenni Grover on Amazon. So that's where you can find me.
Awesome. Thank you again, Jenny.
Thanks, Tammy. You're the best. Go do something creative, okay?
And that wraps up my interview with Coach Jenni Grover. As I mentioned at the beginning, we will have links to all of the tools and resources mentioned today in our show notes. Go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/116. And I have to tell you, as soon as Jenny and I stopped recording, I went and bought that nail polish holder Jenny was telling us about. It's such a good example of why we need each other, why we need community, and how we can learn good tips and new tools from other people. Someone may have already figured out a solution to the problem that you're facing, and by sharing together, we can help each other learn and grow. If you are a maker who is looking for help, I suggest that you reach out to Coach Jenny. She is awesome at what she does. And if you're looking for help with your fibromyalgia more specifically, then we will also have a link in today's show notes where you can connect to a certified fibromyalgia coach. Now, I've got this week's listener shout out for you. This was a message I received on Facebook from Lori Ann. She said, "Hi, Tami. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia over 20 years ago. I've been following your podcast and appreciate the knowledge that you share. I'm wondering if you have an episode on hyperbaric oxygen therapy and what your opinion is. Thanks for all you do to advocate." And thanks so much, Lorianne. That is a fantastic question. There has been some phenomenal research on hyperbaric oxygen therapy, specifically for fibromyalgia. Now, we already had today's episode, so I will definitely have to table this, but I will be planning an episode. I've got some friends who really know a lot about this, and I will work on getting them scheduled so that we can answer all of your questions when it comes to hyperbaric oxygen therapy. But in a quick answer, try it. It can be really, really helpful. And stay tuned for a future episode coming hopefully in the next few episodes. Thanks again, and we'll see you back here next time.